the Amazon, which used to be one of the lungs of the earth, taking up all the carbon dioxide and producing oxygen, it is now in reverse. It's producing more carbon dioxide than it's taking up.
What's the biggest cause of climate change, and what can we do to reduce our impact on the planet?
The major cause of climate change is, with our growing population and the growing amount of finance in that population, our use of fossil fuels has been expanding rapidly over the last 120 years. And the result of this is that we've put an enormous amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So I have to give numbers because I'm a scientist. In the pre-industrial period, 275 parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Today, we're at over 500 parts per million. That's what we've done. And if I could put a very simple phrase into that, it means that imagine that you're lying on a bed and you're feeling cold, you pull a duvet over yourself, and that duvet keeps you warm. That's the function of greenhouse gases. It keeps us warm like a duvet. But if you put a second duvet on your bed, which is what we've been doing, quite simply, you get hot. Now that's where we are today. And the biggest challenge for all of us in humanity, and this is the biggest challenge we've ever had to face up to, is what is happening in the Arctic Circle region. The average temperature rise since the pre-industrial period today is about 1.35 degrees centigrade across the whole planet. But the Arctic Circle region is at 3 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial level. Now, everyone acknowledges that 1.5 is the figure we should not exceed. Well, we've already exceeded it in the Arctic Circle region, and what's happening there is going to influence and is already influencing the whole planet. So what we see happening is, first of all, Greenland ice is now melting irreversibly, which means eventually sea levels will rise by 24 feet. Of course, London, well underwater way before then. And secondly, so the planet will change its shape. We'll lose all of our cities sitting on coastal areas around the world, and more than that. But then, secondly, there's a wind that blows around the North Pole in an anti-clockwise direction. And that wind has now become badly distorted. It's no longer circular. It's become badly distorted because over the North Pole, during the polar summer, the ice that used to cover the Arctic Sea has now melted during the summer. And so 50% of that blue sea is exposed to sunlight. Temperatures there are rising so rapidly that we've got warm air over the North Pole region, and that is pushing cold air down and completely distorting the weather patterns of the world. This is why along the west coast of America, temperatures of 49.7 degrees centigrade were observed in Canada, in a small town, Lytton in British Columbia. Now that's what we're experiencing now. But in addition, there is in the permafrost regions, so the North Pole is sea surrounded by land. In the permafrost regions on the land, Russia, Canada, etc., what we have is a vast amount of methane trapped in there. Explosive release of methane is now happening. Methane is about 120 times more effective per molecule than carbon dioxide at global warming. And when that all is released, let's suppose it was released in 20 years, global temperatures will rise by 5 to 8 degrees centigrade. All right, so what we're talking about is a potential calamity that brings our civilization to an end. How long will it take? I don't know, 50 years, 100 years? But we can look back at our civilization for thousands of years. That's the nature of the threat that we're all faced with. And whatever we do, whatever position we hold, we have to use that position to see that we attempt to manage a safer future for humanity.
You mentioned that fossil fuel consumption is obviously a huge issue when it comes to climate change. For the people listening here at home or for organisations listening, what's the first thing that we must all do to take steps towards a more sustainable future? Is it that reduction of fossil fuel consumption immediately?
Yes, but we can take many, many steps. I mean, one of the things I haven't yet mentioned is the loss of forests, and we're losing forests at a fantastic rate, such that now the Amazon, which used to be one of the lungs of the earth, taking up all the carbon dioxide and producing oxygen, it is now in reverse. It's producing more carbon dioxide than it's taking up. And that's because of all the deforestation occurring. Why is that occurring? We are demanding the products. So the products, for example, are beef. We are eating more and more meat around the world as prosperity rises. And the result is you take out more forests to meet the demand so that you can allow cattle to roam there. That's just one example. We need to look at what we eat, how we live. Are we all ready to go into electric vehicles? That's the only way we should be traveling privately. And of course, we shouldn't be traveling privately. Wherever possible, we need to be traveling publicly, traveling in trains, traveling in buses. So it all depends on whether you live close enough to a railway station, whether you can achieve that. Now, I'm very fortunate. I live in Cambridge. I get around everywhere on a bicycle, and it doesn't take me long to get to the railway station. So I will not use a private vehicle in my traveling. Each one of us is in a different situation, and we need to be looking carefully at how we can reduce our carbon footprint.
So speaking more to businesses, how can businesses communicate their climate risk standards throughout their supply chain?
This is such an important question, because what businesses must recognize is that their supply chain, it may include a product that is causing the removal of forests. It may be totally reliant on products which are contributing massively to climate change. I mean, for example, if your products have to be flown by air into your factories, then that in itself is a big carbon footprint. What I'm always keen on seeing is that when businesses communicate their climate change strategy, they set out what the value of the carbon emissions is from their supply chain. That is critically important.
What message do you have for organisations and governing bodies that are not already investing in their climate risk strategies?
I think the first message is to simply get us all to understand that this is a challenge about the future of humanity. And I mean, I happen to be old enough that I've got grandchildren. My youngest grandchild is a daughter, Lola, aged 3, and Lola will be 70 plus by the end of the century. Or will she? Is she going to be surviving to the end of the century? Becomes a real question. And this isn't me just trying to exaggerate the situation. I think each one of us has a family. Each one of us belongs to a larger family, humanity. And we need to be worried about whether we believe it's a good idea for humanity to continue. Because frankly, if we don't operate in a proper fashion and very quickly, we will no longer survive as a civilization, and the world will continue. Our ecosystems will continue. The biological systems will continue. But without us, they'll do better. Unless we learn that managing our ecosystems, instead of dumping rubbish into them, dumping carbon dioxide into them, managing our ecosystems is critically important to our own lives.
What do you hope audiences take away from your public speeches?
I think what I'm always very keen to say is, Yes, I can't pull punches on the nature of the challenge we're faced with. I think it's phony to simply say, oh, we can manage this. But I am always keen to say, but there is a way forward, right? So, in other words, yes, even at this last minute that I'm describing now, where it's all upon us, we have set out here in Cambridge a strategy. And this strategy involves, first of all, finding out how we can reduce our emissions deeply and rapidly. Net zero by mid-century is too late. We need to do it much more rapidly than that. But the second thing is reduce. The second is remove excess greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So we are working on processes, and this is using biomimicry. We're operating on the basis of mimicking natural processes to remove excess greenhouse gases that we've already put into the atmosphere. And then thirdly, we need to buy time by learning how we might be able to intervene and refreeze the Arctic. So I guess what I'm keen to do is get across this message that if we all shift together, then we can manage this. What is the biggest challenge that we're all faced with? Our societies are consumer driven, and in that consumption, we don't put a value on our ecosystems. And so there is also a problem with our economic system, and we need to tackle that as well.